another way he traumatized his kids is when they are bad, he'd take out his fake eye and make them look into the gaping hole in his head. Which, that's weird. I mean, if you want something, that's weird, you know?
Good evening, listeners, brave navigators of the enigmatic and the concealed. Have you ever felt the pull of the unanswered, the allure of the mysteries that shroud our existence? For more than a decade, a unique comic publisher has dared to dive into these mysteries, unafraid of the secrets they might uncover. This audacious entity is Paranoid American. Welcome to the mystifying universe of the Paranoid American Podcast.
Launched in the year 2012, Paranoid American has been on a mission to decipher the encrypted secrets of our world. From the unnerving enigma of MK Ultra mind control to the clandestine assemblies of secret societies. From the awe-inspiring frontiers of forbidden technology to the arcane patterns of occult symbols in our very own pop culture. They have committed to unveiling the concealed realities that lie just beneath the surface. Join us as we navigate these intricate landscapes, decoding the hidden scripts of our society and challenging the accepted perceptions of reality.
Folks, I've got a big problem on my hands. There's a company called Paranoid American making all these funny memes and comics. Now, I'm a fair guy. I believe in free speech as long as it doesn't cross the line. And if these AI-generated memes dare to make fun of me, they're crossing the line.
This is your expedition into the realm of the extraordinary, the secret, the shrouded. Come with us as we sift through the world's grand mysteries, question the standardized narratives, and brave the cryptic labyrinth of the concealed truth. So strap yourselves in, broaden your horizons, and steel yourselves for a voyage into the enigmatic heart of the Paranoid American Podcast, where each story, every image, every revelation brings us one step closer to the elusive truth.
Welcome to another episode of Paranoid American Podcast. That's me. I'm the Paranoid American. I've been one for pretty much my entire life. And I've got the Paranoid Japanese man. What's the proper way to say that? The Japanaman? Matt Comegys here. He's my co-host in Occult Disney. He's got a million other podcasts that he does. We've been talking about crazy occult symbolism in Disney movies for, I think, going over 2 years now, and it just dawned on me he's never been on here for like a proper interview. So here he is going to answer all the questions. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Groovy to be here. It's actually nostalgic for me because we do have, backgrounds for Occult Disney and Cartoon Cabal, but early on we used to use this background. I didn't get to be in the picture frame at that point in time, so that's an upgrade. You've upgraded the room a bit.
Welcome to the picture frame. If we have more people, they take over the other little screens, and the little girl will like poke you in the head and stuff, but it's just you and me for now. I got a whole bunch of questions for you. We're gonna end up talking about Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys and Charles Manson and MK Ultra, because we pretty much talk about all those things in every show anyways. But you mentioned that you are a savant when it comes to Brian Wilson. Why?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about all this stuff, but I am just a massive fan. So as we're recording this, the news came through a day ago that Brian Wilson passed, which, to be fair, I mean, he kind of checked out about 2 years ago. His wife died, and after that, he didn't make music anymore. On social media accounts, like every 2 or 3 months, or 2 months, you'd see him at Musso and Frank's, right, with a group of like celebrities, and he's just kind of in the center, he's just kind of been installed there. It's like, I guess it's nice he's getting out, but it was mildly depressing as well. So you see the news, you're like, yeah, that was inevitable. I guess there is just it is weird how David Bowie dies. He's not quite 70. I feel real bad. Prince, man, he was 56? That's a big bummer, I love Brian Wilson, one of my favorite musicians, but I'm like, yeah, it's actually, it's kind of time,
Sweet release of death, and then also Weekend at Brian's. I was thinking as you said that, like a little the Weekend at Bernie's shoot off.
Right. We've talked before how I have that's one I'll give the comedy sequel award to, where I like comedy sequels better because he's a voodoo zombie in that one. So,
well, before we get too far, tell people where they can find you, all the other shows that you got going on, do all the plugs up front.
Oh yeah, let's see. Podcasting wise, well, we do our Occult Disney. Come listen to that. I talk about a whole bunch of movies at Films and Filth, where we have a list of 100 of the top rated movies according to IMDb. A weird list of the bottom 100, but it is their official list, and we just alternate between what's supposed to be a really good movie and a really bad movie every week. Sometimes we don't like the good ones and we love the bad ones, so we were trying to do each film fairly. Just finished talking about the Twilight Zone at Time Enough podcast, so if you're into trippy stuff, do that. And I got some music, rovingsagemedia.bandcamp.com. Been doing psychedelic rock, binaural beats to scramble your brain, just some fun electronic music, some folk rock, some written with lyrics written by various mystics. So you're gonna
make me work overtime getting all these links in the description, but I'll do it. I'll do it for you. I'll make sure we link to all the different places.
I can do it for you in 2 links.
Okay, even better. All right. Well, here we go. Now we're here. Let me pop you over here. Welcome out of the window. You're now inside the room, so you're officially on a list. And I have to start with the question that I'm supposed to start every interview with, and I always forget, and it always comes up at the very end. Are you a cop? Because if you're a cop, you have to tell me.
Am I a cop? If I was a Japanese cop, it'd be a little more chill, which I'm not. No copping. I was a Boy Scout I was an Eagle Scout.
I feel like you redirected that, because what you said was that you're not a Japanese cop, but you never denied being an American cop or intelligence.
I could be a Venezuelan cop. No copping on my end. Just Boy Scouting. I was a Boy Scout. So
okay. Well, why did you leave the greatest country on earth that ever existed? Why would you go so far? You couldn't get farther away if you wanted to, right?
I feel like if I did McMurdo Station in Antarctica, right up against that ice wall, maybe that would be a little farther away. But here's the thing. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I have no problem with Atlanta, Georgia. It's a fun city. There's lots of fun stuff.
Chocolate City.
Yeah. Somewhere my brain is just programmed like you got to leave your nest. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you can't end up where you started.
You never heard of Savannah?
Savannah's a nice town, but what happened is, university, Athens, Georgia, it's a little farther away. Then I did environmental education for a few years out of school and taught with the hippies. South Carolina for like a few months, now Pennsylvania for a few months, and then I was out in Maine and Canada for like 2 years or something. I was like, I'll go a little farther. So here, maybe I've told you this before, but I have a very trippy reason why I ended up in Japan. So after doing the environmental education, I came back. I was like, okay, I should start like being a proper adult or something. I had a dream where I was living and working in Melbourne, Australia. So the next day I started looking up things about that, and it seemed really difficult at the time. You couldn't just move to Australia. And then something came up, South Korea. I was like, that's interesting. And I did an interview, and I actually got offered a job to go teach in South Korea. But I was like, I'm from the northeast part of Atlanta, which is extremely Korean. So I'm like, I feel like I'm already in Korea. So I was like, what about Japan?
How good are you at StarCraft?
Nah, never played it. So
you're not allowed to be in South Korea then.
No.
That's actually on their immigration papers. I don't know if you know that. It's part of the test.
Because I have played a Pokemon game, not much, but I've played a little bit. So maybe that's in Japanese.
No, you got to be in the rear with the gear. Otherwise, there's no evidence.
But yeah. So just kind of spur of the moment. Just I had a dream, made me do one thing, then another thing. And then in Japan, then I got offered a few jobs, came out, I was like, I'll do it for a year. And I remember just before going back home after a year, I'm riding a bike. It's one of those memories, where you have seared in your brain. And I just remember every detail of being on my bike and thinking, I'm not quite finished with Japan yet. So I went home for a year, came back, met my wife, got married. We tried to live in America for 2 years. And we were like, we like Japan better. And I've been here for the past 15 years.
What's better?
For me, Japan.
The whole country, everything about it is better than America.
Oh, not everything, but just the way I would like, you could just kind of go through crowds basically. Well, I'm noticed because I'm a foreigner, but it's just like everyone's kind of, people don't want to bug. They don't want to, I don't want to confront people, and neither do most Japanese. So
are there less people hustling on the street? Have you ever been in Japan selling like mixtapes, like buy my album?
If you go to Harajuku or something, for sure. But no, you don't get bugged on the streets. You don't get bugged on trains. The train is quiet. People are talking like last night. There were like 4 old drunk guys got on 2 stations before mine and just were like raising holy hell, and that was like different than usual, you know. Our convenience stores, right?
Yeah, I guess you don't have all your products locked behind little gates and bulletproof glass in your convenience stores.
You can walk around drinking most places. There's a few places where you can't anymore because they were partying too hard for Halloween and New Year's in Shibuya, so now you can't. But that's like one part of one city, so...
I mean, I think a big part of that is there's not a lot of Americans in Japan.
There's more and more. We've seen like a giant influx of foreign tourists, like because Japan was basically completely closed for 2.5 years, and once they opened again, just I went to Team Lab Planets, the digital art installation museum, a few months ago. There were like no Japanese. I'm in a group of 50 people in Tokyo. Like nobody was Japanese. There was one kid who looked Japanese and he had like a King Koopa Bowser hat on, so I assumed he was Japanese. Then he started talking in completely fluent English, so American English if you're talking accents.
Are there any derogatory terms for Americans in Japan?
Well, there's gaijin for all foreigners, right?
Why? That's a new one to me. Gaijin.
Oh, okay, there you go. Gaigokujin means foreigner, and then the shortened slang version is gaijin. So
how offensive is this? Or is this just like a flippant statement?
It's flippant, I think. It's like me calling you a scum bum or something, you know? Like, it's not like actually offensive, but yeah. Someone might get offended, but it's not like some words where it's like that will instantly offend people.
I haven't heard a single one for Americans. I mean, I've heard some ones that English people think are clever, where they just say Amera something. Like it sounds like Americant, but it's a little bit lower. But that one's not even offensive. So there's not a lot of
Yankees
offensive names. That doesn't offend me either. It sounds fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Georgia, so I guess there's cracker, but that's just for people in the Southeast, unfortunately.
Well, Florida too. If there's Florida crackers, which are different from what I understand from normal crackers. And
before the Atlanta Braves, which is, I guess, a name people want to change now, but before it was the Braves, it was the Crackers. It was the Atlanta Crackers was the old baseball team.
That's kind of funny, right? The Chocolate City was home to the Crackers.
That's correct. Yes. Now, when I heard that as a kid, I was thinking like Cracker Jack because it's baseball, which I guess what was the idea on that name? I assume it's for the Cracker Jack, but I'm not sure because the 50s were weird.
Let me ask you, what time of your life did you start caring about occult or esoteric or weird stuff?
So I've always been like psychedelic madness, you know, even as a teenager. Like as a teenager who didn't drink, do drugs or anything, I still loved psychedelic madness, psychedelic music, weird movies. As far as actually getting into occult stuff a little more hardcore, we were just before this recording, I was talking like, if you live in Japan, you're not doing any like drugs, basically, right? Like they're all, so at some point I find out like, oh, you got DMT in your pineal gland. How do you get that out? I'm like meditation, and you get into meditation, you start reading stuff about more occult stuff and things like that too, you know? So 2016, I just kind of like exploded on all that sort of stuff. You start, you know, reading books about Franklin scandals and stuff too, you know, because you're just like, hey, what are all these weird perspectives I've never heard of before?
I would not recommend that as the entry point.
That was not the entry point. That was just the first thing that came to mind for some
Franklin
reason.
Scandal on the
yeah,
same week. That would be rough.
I was just thinking as I was speaking. That's the first scandal that came to mind.
That was, I mean, believe it or not, that was actually one of my first big conspiracy things. Was the Franklin scandal, because for some reason it got suggested, and I saw the cover of it, and it has the word like Satanism and abuse in Nebraska or something. And that word Satanism, and to me, all occult and esoteric was basically just Satanism, because that was the section of Barnes and Noble that all the kids with the black makeup and like the mesh long sleeve shirts and like the spike collars, they would all congregate around the Anton LaVey Satanic Bible. So I just always assumed that tarot and New Age stuff and Satanism and out-of-body experiences and all of that was just kind of in this one big amorphous blob of Satanism. So when that book came up, I was like, I guess I got to start somewhere. This is probably something around that area. And oh man, I was so wrong. But it also allowed me to like start on the deep end and then work my way backwards from that. It's still one of the darkest stories. I don't even recommend it as much anymore because I realized that it only goes into more madness.
Yeah, that's not one of the ones I got into. I've honestly never gotten that deep in that one because, like you said, it's kind of like depressing and dark. And hey, I guess it's just the first one that came to mind. The first ones I really got focused on, of course, were musical conspiracies, right?
Like what? What were some of the early ones?
Oh, I mean, I'm like Paul is dead. That's fun stuff. Here's the thing. One of the things, so you start meditating, and I'm reading like actual spiritual text too, and you just like, I don't believe in anything, which gives you the freedom to think about anything. Do I believe Paul McCartney's dead? No. But is it fun to read about people explaining why that might be the case? Do I believe we went to the moon? No. Do I believe we didn't go to the moon? No. Love hearing everything about it. I love hearing official NASA histories. I love reading like your comic books, Do
you believe John Lennon's dead?
By this time? Yeah, sure.
Do you believe Brian Wilson is dead?
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying, he's been on the way out for a while. I mean, he did put out an album like 2.5 years ago, but that's a weird thing. I mean, why would you even want to fake an 82-year-old man with dementia's death? That's a good question, I guess. But
in the conspiracy world, man, that is the name of the game. There's no age cutoff in which someone can still question whether someone died or not. Joe Biden could live till he's 120 and then die, and someone would be like, I bet he's not really dead. That's a body double. It's like, dude, how long is he supposed to live for?
I mean, I'll give you more juice on hey, John Lennon. Like, I'd love to hear about that. But let's say Brian Wilson, I'm like, yeah, he was sick through most of his life. He's been especially sick the past 2 years. Doesn't read like conspiracy. John Lennon, yeah, we can go all day on that. And that's not what we're here to do today, but you certainly could.
Well, Beatles has the Aleister Crowley connection, and that usually opens it up. And then, of course, the Paul is dead and the album cover. Is that definitively supposed to be him, dead on the Abbey Road?
No, but Paul McCartney's explanation to why he was not wearing shoes is very bizarre. Have you heard the explanation?
No, what was his explanation?
He was like, it was a very hot day. It was summer. So the road was very hot. So I took off my sandals. I'm like, what?
Which is the opposite of what you would do if the road was hot.
Yeah, that's honestly, for me, that's like almost like one of the biggest things that makes me almost wonder, hey, is there some truth to this? What I also like, there are various versions of the theory, of course. There's one where Paul McCartney is horribly disfigured and doesn't die. So they get a proxy to basically be him for decades. The part of that theory has Paul McCartney actually coming back and like becoming Paul McCartney again in the mid-aughts. And if you go from that time, if you think in the 90s, Beatles anthology, it's kind of puffy, middle-aged Paul McCartney. And then about 2005-06, he looks a little different. I mean, he lost a lot of weight too. But
so the Christmas song is also the fake McCartney in this theory?
Well, in this theory, McCartney would actually still be writing most of this music, but the face guy would be different because Paul himself was, like horribly injured for some time. That's variant theory. There's variant theories here. So
I needed you to get me caught up on all the Beatles stuff, but even more important, since you are a self-proclaimed Beach Boys savant, or is it just Brian Wilson?
Oh, no, I could go all days on the Beach Boys. So I guess I should.
First, sell me on the Beach Boys. Let's just say that I heard it in the car once, and I know what it is, obviously, because it's in like every retro surf shop that you'll ever enter. But sell me on why I should actually go and listen to a Beach Boys album start to finish this week.
Pet Sounds is, you've put in the title here. It's pretty much, I think, correctly considered one of the best albums of all time. When I was more into psychedelic experimentation, I do remember there's another Sunshine Pop. That's kind of a variant. The Beach Boys have surf rock Sunshine Pop. and I remember listening to other Sunshine Pop and thinking that would kind of be cool with psychedelic experimentation. Somehow Pet Sounds broke through. It doesn't seem that psychedelic, but all the layers there. Because the surf stuff's fine. That's 1962 to 1965 or so. Fun stuff, good stuff. At that point, that's when Brian goes a little nutty, stops touring with the band completely, starts spending all of his time in the studio, making these dense arrangements. And Pet Sounds is kind of the culmination. That Smile too, but we'll talk about Smile because that's a weird one.
Well, I want to talk too about the breakdown that you're talking about. Are there any theories on what caused that breakdown? If there was like a specific catalyst or event or anything?
Here's one of the weird things about the Brian Wilson story. Like talking about him being traumatized, programmed, all that sort of stuff. It's not even a conspiracy. That's like, people were like, we heard you got abuse from your dad, and it's an interview thing. This is probably around 2000 where there's an interview, and it's kind of one of those like 60-minute things where it's like, tell us, where usually the person is trained for the media and they start talking about, yeah, my father is a very complicated person. Like I loved him, but there were times when he blah, blah. That's the normal answer, right? So they ask him this question in an interview. He's just like, yeah, my dad used to beat the shit out of us. And that was his answer. Finished. I mean, there's like weird, like he had a fake, Murray Wilson, the father. Yeah, he used to beat the shit out of him. Brian Wilson was deaf in 1 ear. One theory to that is that dad whacked him on the head too hard when he was like 5 years old. So,
for the better.
Well, he did pretty well with 1 ear, didn't he? But and that's like all the Beach Boy stuff's in mono, because why would he mix in stereo if he only has one working ear? Like,
are there any stories about his dad? Any crazy, like, did he come from a satanic coven?
No, but he was a California guy. I think metalwork or something. He was a failed musician. He wanted to be a musician. Being in metalwork, he was lost an eye. Apparently, another way he traumatized his kids is when they are bad, he'd take out his fake eye and make them look into the gaping hole in his head. Which, that's weird. I mean, if you want something, that's weird,
You don't clean your room, you got to stare into the eye cavity for like 10 minutes straight.
Yeah, stare into my eye cavity. So, things like that. And then he is their manager for the first couple years. Like, as a failed musician, is like, okay, you boys, I guess we're doing this for a few years. He ended up selling their musical catalog without telling them, just because he's like, surf music's not going to last. And he was fired as the manager by Brian Wilson in a screaming match when he was trying to, too many arguments in the studio. Son, you gotta do it this way. He's like, get out eventually. And then shortly after that has breakdown, right? So he kicked that out of the studio. He's starting to do a little drugs. He is mentally ill. From the mid 60s on, he had like voices in his head telling him to die and stuff. So apparently is what they say, at least.
Is this the claims about the voices? Is this something that he admitted in like an interview or a book or something?
No, this is like half the story of his life. I mean, he's in, famously like the Bare Naked Lady song, he's staying in his room for years in the 70s. He's got, again, not a conspiracy theory. He spends 10 years, or maybe not quite that long, but for many years, he's under the auspices of Dr. Eugene Landy. They hired the guy who is basically like his full-on handler, like, here is your daily schedule. You don't talk to your family unless I'm on the call with you, all that sort of stuff. So
I've seen a couple documentaries. I think there was even like a theatrical movie that kind of focuses on the relationship between Brian Wilson and Landy. And in those interpretations, they show him as creating that isolation and separating him from everyone else just so that he could more easily fleece Brian out of all of his money and kind of swindle him. But I have also heard implications, but no really detailed stories about Landy being a legitimate handler, like an actual CIA, MK Ultra, or some other group that wanted to have a say in pop culture and saw that this was a way in. Is there... like, was he just a con artist, or do you think that there was more to it?
Well, I would say he was a real handler in any sense of the word. Was he actually working for the CIA? That's up for grabs, right? But is he a handler doing handler stuff? That's 100%. He had he in 1991, there was a court restraining order, so he couldn't handle anymore. After that point, he's married. Hey, is that lady a handler? I don't know. Just you change your handlers at some point.
Well, I guess there's a couple definitions of a handler, because in some cases a handler is a expected part of a job. If I'm a CIA agent out in the field, I would actually expect to have a handler, and we would have like a two-way, or we do. I'll just put it out there. I am a CIA agent. I do have a handler. We have a two-way relationship where I realize that I'm being handled, but it's almost like having a business manager or something that kind of takes care of you. But then there's also a version of a handler in which it's unwittingly done, where Brian Wilson doesn't realize he's being handled. He thinks he's just got a manager, but he's got a manager plus extra platinum VIP package DLC plan, right? And he doesn't realize this. Do you think Brian asked for the handling, or did someone else impose the handling on Brian, or was this just he got unlucky and ran across Dr. Eugene Landy, and Landy just happened to be very hands-on?
His brothers put him with Landy in the 70s for a couple years and then cut it off, because I don't think he was as extreme then, but he's still a little bit like he was asking for more money, if nothing else. Then I think Mike Love's brother was actually basically handling Brian Wilson for a few years, because he was very mentally ill, right? He just even as a person just needed someone kind of looking after him. And then in the 80s, he's grown to 300 pounds. He's barely functional. I think he shows up at a few Beach Boys concerts, sits at the piano, and does nothing, because he doesn't play with the Beach Boys much after 1965 on stage. But and then the brothers rehire Landy within a few years, kind of realize, crap, that was a mistake, and we can't actually access our brother anymore.
This is that's why the Britney Spears conservatorship.
Yeah, I mean, apparently one of the reasons he's not on the hit song Kokomo is because they just couldn't get hold of him.
Wasn't answering his phone.
Yeah, wasn't answering his phone that day. I was like, let's record. I mean, that's always a weird song, and that's that's a weird song. Okay, but
well, aside from Brian, I guess, and I've seen the movies, and I heard about the breakdown, and he goes into isolation, and he's also a musical genius when it comes to mixing and composition, arrangement, innovative. But Dennis is always the more interesting Wilson, just because of how connected he is to the Mansons. So where does Dennis fit into all this? Are you as savant about Dennis?
Yeah, if anyone wants to do some Dennis, he only put out one proper album, which is called Pacific Ocean Blue. It's really good. It's really weird and moody. It's not what you expect, because he was the surfer of the band. He was the only one of the Beach Boys that surfed. I guess he was the middle brother, the rebellious brother, basically. He was the one that would very quickly tell Murray Wilson to fuck off and get hit harder, but then leave the house and surf. So
and then go chill with Charlie.
Well, that's him picking up hitchhikers. Apparently, he's that weird prickly guy, but at the same time, apparently just we make people with him, give money to homeless people, stuff like that. So of course he's picking up hitchhikers too. And he happened to pick up a couple Manson girls, and they're like, hey, you got to meet our friend. And then, his friend moved in and took over his house for a while. And I guess he figured out, I don't remember. I think he just moved. And I don't think he kicked him out. I think he just moved.
Well, yeah. So you mentioned that Manson just moved in and kind of took over. In addition to that, Dennis Wilson started to publicly mimic a lot of the things that Charles Manson would say. Charles Manson had a quote that goes something like "total paranoia is total consciousness," which I use on some of my end screens because it's perfect. And Dennis Wilson used to say very similar stuff about total truth is total fear, or some other variation of that. So it sounds almost as if he was a student to Charles Manson's kind of mentorship, or that Charles Manson was this sort of guru and that Dennis Wilson was studying under him. Is there anything real to that?
Obviously there was a honeymoon period where a lot of that would have slipped in. And I think it was to the point where there's okay, now you need to become part of the family, is where he's like, maybe not. Of course, Manson was notoriously very angry, murderously angry against Terry Melcher, producer Terry Melcher. And I guess the Beach Boys song came out probably about November, about the time of the murders. I guess it wasn't for Wilson, but I'm sure he was very unhappy with Dennis Wilson, because on the album 2020, there's a song called Never Learn Not to Love, which is just, it ceased to exist. It's like no changes. And the name on it's Dennis Wilson, which especially in late, well, see, they should have put Manson's name on it. I think it was like summer 69. So you could still put his name on, I think. Well, they don't get caught till November, is it right? They don't get apprehended till November. I wish Manson's name was on the Beach Boys album.
Well, my understanding, which is probably flawed, and this came from not the Chaos book, but the Chaos documentary, which apparently, it's like 1% of the book. But in the documentary, they mentioned that part of this arrangement was that Manson had a legitimately decent song, and they saw this bumpkin guy that, this rube that had no idea how the music industry worked, and he was desperately trying to break into the music industry, and they just saw a really easy way to just take credit and get all the payment and not have to pay Manson any royalties, because I believe they actually purchased it from him. Like, he actually got paid for it, but it was a very irregular deal where almost everyone was already in the trend of getting credits in order to get royalties as the song continued to play and get sold around. But in this case, they just outright bought the song from Manson. And I guess at the time he's like, oh yeah, great. But then when he realizes that that's not how the industry typically works. So I wonder, did they do that to take advantage? Did they do that because they already knew Charles Manson was like problematic? It doesn't make sense why it even got that far, because Brian Wilson must have known that it came from Charles Manson. Dennis Wilson obviously knew that it came from Charles Manson. So why not give him credit? Is the only answer just greed?
Also, he kind of bombed his audition, apparently. Like, he did a couple demo sessions. You can hear the stuff on YouTube, by the way. You can listen to Charlie sing to you, which I'm guessing you probably have.
Yeah, what's the one, like Get Your Game Girl, or like You've Got Game Girl?
Not a bad song. I mean, he wrote several other songs that are not bad, but they brought him into Brian Wilson's house, because since Brian did not want to leave his house, they built a little studio in his Bel Air house. And I think Brian was in his room. He didn't actually come down to hang with Manson, but Carl Dennis, maybe a few other Beach Boys were hanging out. And he was just surly. They're like, hey, could you like maybe try this? Like, you don't tell me what to do. It's my song. He's like kind of being so much like that. They're probably like, they might have already bought the song by that point, so they're trying to do him a favor, and then realizing this guy is not going to work in a studio.
One of the stories is that after this big falling out, that Manson handed Dennis a bullet and kind of walked away. And this was his way of saying, hey, friendship over, I assume. I assume that if someone hands you a bullet and they're angry, that's kind of what that means, is like, we're not cool anymore. Is that a true story that you've heard before too? Or is that like just one of these rumors?
I think I've heard that before. Maybe in the Chaos book. I read that maybe, when did it come out? I read it like not too long after it came out. So,
well, 20 years of research. I think it came out like in the last 10 years.
Yeah. So it's been a little while since I read it, but yeah, definitely a good read on that. So,
so there's also connections with Charles Manson and other musicians and other, like you mentioned, Terry Melcher, and Terry Melcher was a connective tissue between like Peter Fonda and Neil Diamond and Nancy Sinatra. And so it almost seems that Manson, through Wilson and through Melcher, he did have access to like potentially becoming big. And another one of the things, I think this is from the Chaos series, they mentioned that everyone kind of realized that he had something about him, but it just wasn't marketable. It wasn't something that made sense in any of the traditional, like, oh, just give him a guitar, just put him in front of the microphone. Like, he didn't have the right energy for any of those specific things, but he still had that it factor. And maybe the it factor was just being a serial killer or like a mind control master, right? And they just didn't realize it.
Yeah, if he had allowed himself to be a little more malleable in the studio, who knows what would have happened? We would have had a happier guy. Maybe he wouldn't have ordered, his family to go murder some people. Once the Manson and his main cronies are in prison, the rest of the family actually records 1 or 2 albums of his songs, which are more listenable because it's not just someone like sitting with a guitar playing in variable time signatures. It's a little more constructed.
There was another connection between Dennis Wilson and Charles Manson, and that's that Dennis Wilson, in addition, I guess you just said that he met Manson through picking up Manson's girls as they were hitchhiking. They're like, oh, you got to meet this guy. But throughout the rest of their relationship, I guess that Dennis Wilson somehow became the guy that would drive the Manson girls to the free Haight-Ashbury clinic for their STD tests. And that this clinic was the exact same place that Charles Manson was allegedly being handled himself. This is where his CIA handler was there as parole officer to check in on him, happened to also be at this free clinic, and that anytime he would get in trouble, he'd have to go to this clinic, and then they would basically just write it off. He would violate parole. He would never go back to jail. So this one clinic both has a reason there Dennis Wilson is constantly going back, and a separate reason in which Charles Manson is going back and his girls are going back.
I mean, it's like, now in the 60s, it's like, what is the infrastructure of Hollywood? We don't really know, You were talking about songwriting credits. Jan and Dean, there's another very strange story. And I was reading a book about before Manson. It was like 58 to 65 or something of the California music scene kind of starting, the surf rock and the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean. And like Jan would just like give songwriting credits out as like favors. Maybe that had nothing to do with the song. You just give it out as a favor. And then he writes Dead Man's Curve and then basically permanently destroys himself on the Dead Man's Curve. That's weird stuff. That's almost like some coded thing, like you screwed up, so you're gonna live the fate of your song. He was also an insane driver, so I guess it makes sense. But
I want to get into Smile 2 in a second. I got a bunch of different notes that I gleaned from Tracy Twyman's Minnie Mouse presentation, because she gets pretty deep into the Wilson stuff. So, like, for example, she was mentioning that in addition to Dennis Wilson and Terry Melcher, and that Terry Melcher was the son of an actress, Doris Day. So that's where he kind of got his into the whole Hollywood world and music world. We mentioned Neil Diamond, Nancy Sinatra, Peter Lavenda, who writes Sinister Forces. He also mentioned Deanna Martin, Dean Martin's daughter, Peter Falk, Jane Fonda. Also, one of the members of Charles Manson's cult, one of the early members, was Angela Lansbury's daughter, the Murder, She Wrote lady. It's interesting that how many high society, like media icons and media icon relatives, got swept up into this fold. So, I mean, part of me wonders, and I'm wondering what you think about this, that was Dennis Wilson happening across Charlie's girls just a total coincidence, or could they have been like a honeypot? Could they have like been fishing for Dennis Wilson or someone like a Dennis Wilson?
Someone like they were 100% honeypotting. They were, you send the girls out to sway some folks into the family, right? Especially rich guys who can live in their house for a few months, that sort of thing. So they really did. They get their hand right in that honeypot. But yes, they were for sure doing that. They were dumpster diving as well. That's how it works. As far as the other people you're mentioning, I just read a book, and it's not a conspiracy book or anything, but it's called Hollywood Eden by Joel Selvin, which, has Nancy Sinatra and Terry Melcher and all these people, like, because they all went to the same high school. The Beach Boys lived in Hawthorne, which is, I guess, kind of a little south of the city. I've never been to LA, but I've stared at maps a lot. Hollywood's a little north of downtown. So the Beach Boys are in a much more like blue collar area, where a lot of the people you're mentioning, they're Hollywood royalty. They're actually going to the same high school, So who knows what's going on at high school? It could be like a intense government, CIA program controlling these kids. It could just be a principal with a plan, but there's definitely some level of
behind it. Yeah, we need to do a full, like a deep dive on the principles of these high schools where these kids were coming from. Has anyone done that?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying it could be macro level, it could be micro level, but obviously something's going on with these kids, right? Like you're trying to exert some level of control and how they act, right? Because that's if it's the principal, I mean, it's literally kind of your job, right?
Well, and aside from the principals, another person that seemed to have had a huge influence in at least Dennis Wilson's life and Charles Manson, another one of these like connective tissues, was Terry Melcher. And that he was the record producer friend to Dennis that was kind of putting some of those connections together. And he also, this is part of the story from Tracy Twyman, was that Charles Manson, and I assume from Chaos too, Charles Manson felt miffed because of the issue with the song and the Beach Boys and with Dennis Wilson, and therefore by proxy with Terry Melcher, because Melcher was like the actual producer that was kind of like helping all this happen, and that Manson sent his people after Melcher, but Melcher had leased his house to Tate and Polanski, and that's the only reason. I don't know how much I believe this, but that was the reason that the tragedy became around the Tate murders and not the Melcher murders. It was just because no one gave Charlie the heads up. Oh, by the way, Terry moved, and now these new people are in here. That part is high, sort of like speculation. But
see, I believe that because it's so stupid. He didn't send people to Dennis's house because obviously he didn't know where Dennis lived, because Dennis moved out of the house they took from him, basically. And you don't leave a forwarding address in that case,
And then, well, there's also a connection that apparently Melcher was being courted by the Process Church, which has some murky ties to Manson, perhaps. But the ultimately, I'm wondering if Melcher is dabbling in the Process Church and Manson is tangential to the Process Church. Is Dennis Wilson somehow dabbling in Satanism and Process Church type stuff too? I would assume so. I'm assuming that he's friends and deeply involved with Terry Melcher, so it's not like it would be a complete shock, like, oh my god, I didn't know Terry was into that. It seems like something he would know.
It's LA in the late 60s. It's hip. I mean,
I guess everyone's into it, yeah.
Like, I think you have the argument that the Satanic Panic's been going on for centuries, but the version that, the pop culture version is from the 80s, so the late 60s, it's like Anton LaVey, the Kenneth Anger films,
And also there's this connection with Bobby Beausoleil, who was also in a band, I think it was called Love, and that he ended up being another one of Charlie's sort of like little cult members that actually has some bodies on him. I think he's in prison still.
Yes, I don't think he recorded with Love, but he was with them early on. Actually, he
was in the band, and then the band became Love, but I don't think he followed the band to that extent.
No, he's actually made albums from prison. I know he made a soundtrack for Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising from prison. Of course
he would, yeah.
And it's actually he's a much better musician than Manson. It's a pretty listenable soundtrack. It's better than the Jimmy Page version.
He also played Cupid in the movie Mondo Hollywood, which was also called Hippie Hollywood Acid Blasting Freaks. I don't know if you've ever seen this one.
Oh no, I think send me a link for that.
That sounds like something that you would enjoy watching.
It does. I'll respond with Psyched by the 4D Witch. Ever seen that one?
No.
Okay, there's some madness that involves satanic sexual witchcraft. So
what else? So there was another guy named Gary Heineman who was also friends with both Dennis Wilson and Beausoleil. So like they had this little clique as well. Like Wilson's now connected to Beausoleil in this way, and Beausoleil was in another movie called Ramrodder with one of the Manson girls named Gypsy. And then I guess he also was involved in like building some kind of set design or whatever. But essentially it ties this picture that Beausoleil and Wilson and Melcher and Manson, they might not have all been like friends just because they all worked with each other in terms, but they were all 1 degree of separation away from each other.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the LA at the time was basically like a bunch of small communities. So even though it's a big city, it's like little capsules, So in that scene, like as I mentioned earlier, I just covered the Twilight Zone. When you go over the guest stars and stuff, you're like, there's only like 100 character actors in Hollywood in the 60s. It feels like there's not actually that many people, like, hey, all this music. I mean, the bands rarely play on these recordings. It's the Wrecking Crew. It's the same group of 30 musicians playing on everything.
Great point. Yeah, very good point.
Why is Pet Sounds good? Because the Beach Boys don't play on it for the most part. I think Carl Wilson plays like one guitar part and Dennis Wilson plays a tambourine, and that's about it.
Another one of those weird epicenters where just a whole bunch of names and people revolve around. Again, it goes back to that free clinic. And the free clinic, this is from some more of the notes, was that the original manager of the Dead, when they were still called the Warlocks, he was Courtney Love's father, and he formed his own music group, and that group was called LSD Rescue, which later becomes the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic. Like, so the clinic itself started as an LSD themed kind of band. And then one of the guys that works at this BEL clinic, he basically claimed that Manson and Dennis Wilson and the girls were the most regular visitors of the entire place. So now you've got Dennis Wilson, like one of the Beach Boys, directly linked to Manson through this exact same like hub, where again Courtney Love's father is like somehow the original. Like it's just this one big incestuous group where all of the different acts seem to come out of.
See, I could see Murray Wilson very much being like part of the program, maybe as a blue collar guy being like, hey, I can put my kids in this program that the rich Hollywood kids are doing, and maybe it'll make something of them, which I guess turned out right. All their lives were weird, but I could certainly see that. Like, take most of the LA bands. I mean, weird scenes inside the Goldmine book. Do you remember the author on that? I don't want to cite his name, but he's putting out the theory. Like, you look at most bands and you can like spot the guy that's probably kind of the CIA guy. You look at Buffalo Springfield. What do they point out there? I think it's usually Stephen Stills. The Byrds, David Crosby. You could start all day on that guy, right? The Dead. I mean, I guess Garcia usually gets that, although I would say Garcia is pretty talented, because usually the guy that has that isn't necessarily the most talented guy in the band, right? Because they need the talent and they need a guy who can like kind of hack it, but it's also part of the program.
So one of the ways to explain some of this away is that a lot of the CIA and military connections in Haight-Ashbury and Laurel Canyon was just that everyone's dad at that point had probably been drafted into one war or another. So it would have been more rare to find someone whose parents didn't have some kind of a military background versus ones that did, right? And that's the reason why some, like even Frank Zappa, like his dad was in, I think, like military intelligence, along with other, Jim Morrison.
He grew up on military bases. Jim Morrison too. Daddy started the frickin' Vietnam War, basically.
Tonkin, yeah, exactly. But again, it's weird how it's this small little group, or at least it fits under a very specific archetype, with either a military background or I guess a background that comes from the Protestant Church and Satanism. It's like one of those two things.
I mean, as a I had a rejoinder once just on that, because I was talking to a friend and I was like, well, what if I look at my background? I'm like, let's see, my grandfather was an army surgeon in World War II. My family's been in America for, hundreds of years, blah, blah. I don't know. I think I had more of a hook when I had this going, but I was like, how many weird details can I get from my family's history and make it sound like something's going on? I don't know.
Well, how many Satanists you got in your family tree?
I mean, I won't be like hail Satan, but I should take your question more seriously. Don't know. I don't know my cousins to speak of, so they could all be into Satan for all I know.
We're talking about outwardly part of a large group, and not just that, but there's also this line between what Manson was getting into, and I'm going to group Dennis Wilson in, because it does seem like for at least a significant amount of time, Dennis Wilson and Charles Manson were two peas in a pod. So
1967, 1968, Manson was very much keyed just to be a totally bizarro pop culture guy, right? The key turns in 69, right? That's when things get dark. I mean, hey, maybe 67, 68, living with Manson was hippie heaven. I don't know. But in 69, once he's got you running through the the brush outside of Spawn Ranch with guns and rolling in dune buggies in the Death Valley. That doesn't sound fun.
So is Brian Wilson checked out during this time? Is he ever hanging out with Charles Manson and Dennis?
He's with his own. Like I said, it sounds like he stayed in his room when Manson came over to record. So there's plenty of people we can put with Brian Wilson, because he became hippie royalty hanging out with all the acid heads in 66, 67 for sure. He definitely came across a group of people that, changed him.
Is the most satanic Beach Boys song the one that was originally Charles Manson's, or do you think they have an even more evil song that's got like hidden messages in it?
Well, if you had asked Brian Wilson, he'd go just to start breaking into Smile. There's the fire music, Mrs. O'Leary's Cow, which during the recording session, he made everyone, the entire wrecking crew, wear like fire helmets or whatever. They did the song, which is kind of cool. It's really freaky. I mean, it sounds tripped out.
Fireman helmets?
Yeah, so everyone had to wear a fireman helmet. And then within a day or two, a few fires broke out around the studio, and he freaked out. And for years, for probably like 3 decades, the story was he destroyed the tapes after that, which it turned out he hid the tapes because you can listen to it. But yeah, it was like he freaked out at the fires that were caused by the fire. So he kind of decided his own song was satanic in that case, I guess.
Okay. Well, let's talk about Smile some more. So where does Smile fit into this?
I got to move the ball back a little bit. They were making all the surf rock. So in 65, end of 64, Brian Wilson has a breakdown. He quits playing with the band live. He rarely shows up with the Beach Boys live after that. The songs become more innate. You start getting stuff like California Girls, where you have that opening orchestral intro that has nothing to do with the rest of the song in a good way. This builds up to Pet Sounds, where you got these massive productions with layers of sound. And then there's Good Vibrations. Started to get recorded during the Pet Sound sessions, finished after, and, cost a ton of money. It's like the most expensive single ever recorded up to that point. It takes like 6 months. He uses like multiple studios, blah, blah, blah. It's recorded modularly, where like, here's 30 seconds of music, here's 30 seconds of music here. Let's edit it all together. So he calls them a mini symphony. It's like, what if I do a whole album that way? So he starts just recording little snippets of music, and whenever the Beach Boys come back, they're kind of like various versions of like, what the hell are you doing?
Can you explain this to me a little bit more? What do you mean when he's stitching, like he's got 30 seconds of the entire song, but then he's like shifting them around, like he's got samples that he's patching together? Or
yes, it's kind of like he's taking samples and trying to stitch them together on analog tape in 1966 and 1967. Smile comes out, like his solo band helps him finish Smile in 2004, and there is a Beach Boys version of Smile that comes out based on that in 2011. The key was, in the early 2000s, his band was like, hey, what if we take all the sections you made and just put them into Pro Tools? It's much easier that way to sequence this stuff. So he's taking plenty of LSD, smoking plenty of weed, and driving himself mad with self-doubt, voice in his head, and just trying to do this thing this engineering job that's basically impossible. I mean, that alone means Smile really wasn't going to come out in 1967.
Yeah, I mean, well, the digital tools completely changed that, because then you can just like automatically sync the different clips together. So he was literally putting it together like a film producer would edit, film clips together.
Correct. Which, doing it basically by himself on audio tape, which is, not on an editing bay. You're just having to splice the tape and stitch it together and stuff like that,
There was a group that specialized in doing this, although I think they came afterwards. I think this was 80s, 90s, called the
Art of
Tape
Noise?
Beatles.
Okay,
Art of Noise too. Classic song. Have you heard of the Tape Beatles before?
I haven't heard of them. What Mission of Burma? They had a tape guy. Do you know Mission of Burma? Sorry, I don't know the
I'm not
tape
familiar.
Okay, they're just they're a 3-piece, real loud, post punk. And then they had a fourth guy who would sit down. He'd be their sound man, so he'd do the sound, but he'd also, at the beginning of the songs, he'd start like recording bits of guitar, bits of the bass, bits of the drums. And as the song went on, he'd like speed them up, reverse them, and so they're playing this punk song. Then as the song goes on, you hear like stuff like that. So it's pretty cool stuff. But but that's on the fly stuff. This is like, with Smile, it's like I have hired 30 musicians on, scale or more. On this top of flight studio. And so he's hemorrhaging money doing this. And when someone's like, play us a song, he's like, here's 30 seconds of music with no vocals. Here's another 30 seconds of music with no vocals. So it's like, what the hell is this, dude? Meanwhile, you're putting fire helmets on people and, doing dumb stuff in the studio because you're tripping. I don't think he says he wasn't tripping in the studio, but hey, anyone would, right?
Is there a correct order to listen to the Beach Boys albums? Is just chronologically, or are there like certain ways that you're supposed to listen to them?
I mean, one, it's like, do you want fun surf rock and hits, or do you want this weird chamber pop orchestral stuff? Do you want the late 60s when Brian's kind of involved but kind of not involved, so the other members are doing more music? And it actually makes it kind of more experimental and weird in a way in some of those late 60s Beach Boy albums. That's how you get a Charles Manson song on there, right? Because it's getting more experimental and weird. But that's when Dennis lets all his friends start playing around in the studio. No, Dennis starts getting a song or two on an album, and actually his are often the standout songs, along with, the one or two songs Brian is willing to show up and do for those albums.
What's the worst Brian Wilson song?
Smart Girls. Look it up on YouTube. He raps. It's Landy period. Oh, you will hate Smart Girls. No one likes Smart Girls. You know what? Wait 2 weeks. Let's give the man a few weeks to rest in peace and then listen to Smart Girls.
What's the worst Beach Boys song?
Smart Girls. Although that's Brian Wilson's solo, so maybe it doesn't count. What is the worst Beach Boys song? Student Demonstration Time, which is Mike Love trying to take a 50s rock song and like pump it up and make it about student demonstrations. And it's just, it makes you facepalm yourself. Here's the fun about the Beach Boys, the Beatles, almost always good. I mean, you might like one song a little less. I don't love Maxwell's Silver Hammer. I don't hate it. It's there. It's fine. It's on the white. See, someone can like it. It's fine. I like, my name, look up the number. I like Revolution Number 9. I think Revolution Number 9 is fun to listen to. The Beatles are very consistent. I always like to say the Beach Boys have higher highs and way lower lows. The Beach Boys made some of the worst pop music you will ever hear, and they also made the best pop music. Not some of just the best pop music you will ever hear.
This is tapping back into when I was growing up and hearing Beach Boys, but even as a kid, I remember thinking, without being able to phrase it this way, that Beach Boys some of the Beach Boys music was annoyingly optimistic in a way that a lot of other music really wasn't. Was that just part of the surf rock genre in general, or was there something about the Beach Boys in particular that would make sense for?
That's correct, but the melancholy slips in very quickly, and that's the thing by Pet Sounds. There's not a surf song on Pet Sounds. That's all melancholic. It's even when it's optimistic, the bass is hitting like a, that's part of the arrangements. When it's optimistic, you still believe in me. The bass is hitting a unsure note, like that's not quite in the right key. So it still has that unsettling thing. Their second album, Surfing USA, okay, that's pretty optimistic. It's got The Lonely Sea on it, which is like this depressing, like surf ballad. In My Room is on the third album. The melancholia slips in and really grows into Pet Sounds. And then Smile, I guess, was him like, oh, you're gonna have some fun now, and there's a few Cabin Essence gets pretty trippy. Surf's Up is extremely melancholic on Smile, so but Smile's more fun, right? And weird.
What are some other like weird Brian Wilson or Beach Boys tangents that we haven't gone on yet?
Oh geez, Full House. Their Full House appearances in John Stamos. You want to talk about that? That's fun.
No, all Beach Boys. Did Brian make it too?
In the late 80s. So here's the thing. The Beach Boys, Dennis dies in 83, supposedly drowning because he was looking for photos off of his boat, which I don't know. That's a weird story. Who knows what happened there? Maybe Mike Love put a hit on him for all I know. But yeah, they're getting old. They're middle age or whatever in the mid 80s. And they see this cool guy and they're like, maybe you can drum a bit for us. John Stamos is there to be the cool Dennis now because Dennis is dead. So we got this very attractive. And then Full House takes off, right? So he's also a star now. So he's in the Kokomo video, by the way. He's playing the bongos.
Are you saying that John Stamos was a Satanist?
Well, he's a Beach Boy. He might have been a Satanist too. He was at least a Beach Boy.
So Dennis Wilson falls out, drowns, same way that Colby, CIA director, drowned off of a boat.
They took Colby in the middle of the pond, Godfire style. So
Colby and Dennis were riffing on guitar, and they just fell off of a boat. But so then John Stamos immediately fills in. He fills the gap and is now the guy that used to be the connective tissue between Charles Manson and Melcher is now John Stamos, right? That's an accurate statement.
He's never like a full member of the band, but you can find videos in like the past year of him playing with Mike Love's Beach Boys. So he makes plays with Mike Love. But yeah, as a returning the favor, the entire Beach Boys show up to say hi to Beck. I don't remember the names of people. There's a Becky in Full House. The Olsons were still too young. I think it was first season. Anyway, the whole Beach Boys, Brian included, shows up. If you look at the clip too, at this point, Brian was fully under Landry's handling, and he was looking slim and trim, but he also has this look like one of the most possessed faces you'll ever see as he's standing there, not knowing what the hell's going on and why they are there. So yeah, they shipped him over for the day to be with the Beach Boys for this video or this episode. And other Beach Boys show up in later episodes. I think Mike Love shows up like 3 times because he's apparently becomes John Stamos's BFF or whatever. So that's like Dennis and Manson. Like it works out. You know, Mike Love and John Stamos. It works out.
Did the Beach Boys ever star on Family Matters?
Not quite. There's the just to reference our Occult Disney, there is a crossover TGI Friday, whatever they called it, where all the shows go to Disney World. So there's a scene of Family Matters of like, where am I going with it? Anyway, there's identical scenes. Like there's the same Tower of Terror guy, and that's the same scene on different sitcoms. So the worlds are tied together, but I don't think the Beach Boys made it to Family Matters properly.
Okay. They didn't hang with Urkel before.
Or what was the other Urkel called?
Stefan
Urkel. Sorry. Thank you for coming up with that. I thought I'd back myself into a depressing corner, not remembering Stefan.
No, I know. No, I've watched that entire series, every episode, at least 7 or 8 times throughout my life. In fact, I think I'm overdue to rewatch.
Wow.
It is one of the best theme songs ever. The nostalgia of it aside, it is legitimately a great song musically. Like the lyrics, the vocals, everything. I forgot who it was. The guy that did it made like 3 or 4 different really memorable themes. I think he also did Perfect Stranger. I'm probably just making stuff up at this point. But
maybe he did Full House. I don't know. You have seen the Too Many Cooks video, yeah? The old Adult Swim clip.
Yeah, that's 100% kind of based on those type of
yeah. That's what I'm getting at. Did I answer your last question?
Charles Manson had made his way into the industry, that he would be making that, but for real. It wouldn't be an Adult Swim show. It would just be like produced by Charles Manson.
Did I actually answer your last question? As I go on such wild
tangents. That was perfect. I did not know that the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson made their way onto Full House. What else you got?
Oh, what else do I got? Let's see. They were banned from playing the 4th of July at Washington, D.C. by a chief of staff or something. So they got to play the next year because it caused a controversy. Like we can't have any rock and roll in 1983 on our Capitol lawn.
Because there were hippies or what? You're just rock and roll was.
I think it was just the rock that got him, and then everyone was like, "What the hell?"
Beach Boys rock. We're not even talking about like.
We're talking like
Ozzy,
because obviously they're going to show up and play, the hits, right? That is the thing.
Like Danny McFerrin shows up. They're like, "Whoa, guy, it's a little bit much." They can't handle Banana Phone even.
I guess the Beach Boys is one of the more notable band splits as well. So Dennis dies, they sub in John Stamos, right? Brian hasn't been playing them for decades, so whatever. Brian has a solo career now. He's basically out of the Beach Boys by the late 80s. So the Beach Boys keep doing their thing without Brian, which they'd been doing anyway. Carl dies relatively young, 57, the other Wilson brother. He dies at 97, 98, somewhere around there. And that's, I think Brian is on record saying, I basically assume that's where the Beach Boys broke up, because at that point, you now get the Mike Love show. So Mike Love and Bruce Johnson he's another one of those Hollywood guys. He went to I don't know if he went to that high school, but he was definitely in with, Melcher, Doris Day, Nancy Sinatra, all that sort of stuff. So the sub for Brian was like very much like from that Hollywood establishment. And he had cut his teeth doing copies of Beach Boy songs, basically. So, so he sticks with Mike Love. Like even today, I think if you see the Beach Boys, you're going to see an 84-year-old Mike Love and 82-year-old Bruce Johnson as the only actual Beach Boys on stage. So you got that. Al Jardine kind of gets phased out of the band and starts doing like Al Jardine and Friends or whatever. Brian Wilson starts touring on his own, and then some point he invites Al to come. So Al's in the band. They invite in the early 70s, they had hired 2 South African guys to play drums and guitar. Sail on Sailor is sung by one of these South African guys. So he invites one of them back to play. So you always have like these like competing touring versions of the Beach Boys. They get together for a reunion in 2012, put out an album that's not bad, not perfect, but not bad. They do a tour that's somewhat well received.
Is there any rap? Is there a rap song on it?
No. Sorry, I did have to think for a second, didn't I? I think Brian learned his lesson almost. He did one of his solo albums, that Lucky Old Son. He tries to do like kind of slam poetry between the songs, and as good a singer as Brian Wilson was, he's not a very good talker, So
did he drop N words in his rap?
Oh no, he didn't. No, he didn't do that. But it's just like he was saying everything like this, like he's reading it off the paper. It didn't sound good. Where are we going with this? So 2012. This is fun. So the Beach Boys are back together. Every surviving Beach Boy is on stage. They did an album together. Near the end of the tour, Mike Love's like, "Yeah, I'm firing the rest of them and going to get back to my own touring." Which is because if he tours with that version of the Beach Boys, it's really expensive. Whereas if he uses the version of the Beach Boys he'd been doing for 20 years, he can do state fairs. He can do like anything. Which I get, it makes sense from a business perspective. I see it, He's like, well, before this,
the price of LSD has skyrocketed at this point, so he can barely even keep Brian on the tour without his daily, dietary requirements, I assume.
Mike Love doesn't need LSD. He has TM meditation. Mike Love, big TM guy, by the way, very in with it. Maharishi. When he gave his like really aggressive speech when the Beach Boys were inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987, he gave this super aggressive speech, like basically like smack talking the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and stuff. And later it was like, well, I forgot to meditate that day. So, so maybe he forgot to meditate the day when he fired his cousin from the Beach Boys again. So yeah, in 2012, I was like, wait a minute, did Brian Wilson just get fired from the Beach Boys? But yeah, he tours a couple more years, and yeah, he just gets old, like the touring goes down. 2019 is like, my brain doesn't work, so I'm going to postpone the tour. He gets out one album of pop music in the mid 2010s, which is not bad. It's not great. His last album came out about 2.5 years ago. It's him just playing his old songs at a piano, very old man music at that point. So I guess he faded out a bit, which I don't know, if you're 83, almost 83, that's not the worst thing.
Are there any songs by the Beach Boys that are claimed to have like secret hidden messages if you play them backwards or anything like this?
Not that. You got Good Vibrations, though. Like he says that was his first LSD trip, and his mom telling him about good vibrations, kind of in a mystical sense of the way. So you got that. You got the TM song. There is a song. I'll need to look at a track list for that.
Like no like back cue songs.
If you want to backmask the Beach Boys, who knows? It is in the LA studios. Other stuff there probably has backmasking. I feel like that's kind of a 70s thing more. The Beatles. Yeah, you can backmask the Beatles. What's your favorite bass masking? I feel like the Beatles are the gold standard of going backwards. Maybe Black Sabbath.
Wasn't there a Doors song? That was you're supposed to backmask, and it was Beatles. I don't know. To be honest, man, I never really hear it until someone tells you what they're saying, and then I can hear it. But I've also heard plenty of those auditory illusions where you only know what it's saying if you say it first, and then if you say a completely different phrase, then you hear that one too. So I don't know. And I wonder too, what kind of power does that have? Is there some sort of loophole where God was like, oh damn, that Satan keeps putting these backwards messages and is just ruining everything. I wish I would have written that one into the law book or something.
Sorry, I just bumped up my volume here because I'm checking something. There's something. Maybe it's like I was playing Never Learn. I don't know if that's a Manson one. It's on the same album. It's All I Want to Do, and all he wants to do is have sex. And I think there's some like sex noises like really low in the fade out of the song. So
is that all I want to do is zoom, and a boom, boom?
Yeah. Something like that. It want to be. We got into that before. But what are some other songs that, I feel like the people don't. One thing is also the lyrics of the Beach Boys, like 90% of the lyrics suck. I mean, Brian Wilson could not write lyrics to save his life. Mike Love would write a lot of lyrics with them. They'd be fine, but they'd be kind of like just, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, the general Beach Boys lyrics.
Well, this is why they're stealing from Charles Manson.
Right, exactly. So Pet Sounds, actually, I think he meets the guy in the frickin' Celio house. Brian Wilson meets Tony Asher, an advertising man, and then a week later calls him, hey, come over to my house, which he thought was a joke at first. He thought his advertising guys were putting them on. But no, Brian Wilson wanted to try writing lyrics, and most of Pet Sounds is written with this guy, Tony Asher. After that is where the hip crowd comes in. This is where it's a little more like, this is where the Laurel Canyon stuff slips in a little bit more, because Van Dyke Parks comes in through. He's a madman hippie, right? And he writes over and over, the crow flies uncover the cornfield, and lyrics like that for Smile, which are fantastic lyrics. But that is where Mike Love comes in. Like, what the hell are these lyrics, and why do I have to sing them? Look at the lyrics for Surf's Up, man. If you want, you could probably find something encoded into those if you wanted. A diamond necklace plays the pawn. That's some weird stuff. It appears it's based on the alliteration, the sound, but it is like this, Hollywood hipster writing this stuff in the mid 60s. So who knows what's coming through in there?
I think that might be a fun tangent to go on, backmasking the Beach Boys and just trying to find some kind of satanic messages.
Well, first do it forward for Smile. Go forward for Smile at first. Just do those lyrics forward and see what you get.
Well, this is, to butcher a Bill Hicks joke, but he says something like, what do you think is more evil, like backmasking the Beatles or just listening to New Kids on the Block regular?
Hey, people today though, they'd be like, yeah, New Kids, that's nostalgic. Let's get step by step on the radio, man. Whatever the radio is these days. No, I always hate it. See, I'm at that exact age where, like, right when the New Kids are getting, that's where I'm starting to notice girls, and that's when girls are starting to notice the New Kids. So you're getting especially pissed off. In
my mind, New Kids on the Block and Beach Boys, I mean, maybe not comparable musically, but they sort of represent the same, like,
yeah, Beach Boys, the OG boy band.
Yeah, really? Weren't there older boy bands in the Beach Boys?
I guess they were doo-wop groups. But, I mean, what you got before that? Buddy Holly and the Crickets is what you get for a band, right?
Not as fun. Not as fun as the Beach Boys doing acid.
No, not as fun at all. So, yeah, the Beach Boys are kind of the OG boy band. I mean, and the Beatles are kind of marketed as such, in America in particular. But, well, in England too, I guess. So, New Kids, it's kind of like, they don't have instruments anymore. They look cool with guitars in the 60s, I guess. So, the One Direction told guitars, I don't know. I don't remember. Did they pretend to at least be a band? I mean, the Beach Boys were basically pretending. I mean, they'd play live, I guess, but in the studio after 1964, you were very rarely hearing a Beach Boy play on their classic recordings.
Okay, so it goes Beach Boys, Menudo, New Kids on the Block. That seems like the progression of the boy band's culture.
That sounds about right. Like again, the Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man. The only Byrd playing an instrument on that is Jim McGuinn at the time playing his 12-string Rickenbacker. The rest of the Byrds were not even contracted to be allowed to play in the studio for that song. In fact, I think two of the Byrds aren't involved in that song because they don't sing. So you got the three singers, you got Jim McGuinn playing his, Roger McGuinn, whoever, playing his 12-string guitar, and the rest is the regular cast of studio musicians. Your favorite drummer is Hal Blaine. He played on everything. Your favorite bass player is Carol Kaye. She played on everything.
And then somehow John Stamos works his way in there. We don't even know how.
John Stamos wasn't even part of the Wrecking Crew. Yeah. No, they were just like, he's a hip young guy. Let's get him, So so they honeypotted too, I guess, with John Stamos.
Well, we're running a little bit long here. Let's just get into this.
Hey, conspiracy buffs, I double dare you to take some PCP, the Paranormal Conspiracy Probe. On your marks, get set, and go!
All right, don't be too jarred. I know you do have to go to work today, so just a little bit of PCP before you're on your way out. The rules are, I'm going to just mention a phrase or a statement to you, and you're just going to give me a rating from 1 to 10 on how much you agree with that statement or theory or whatever it is that I say. That make enough sense?
Okay.
So, for example, if I said there's infinite land beyond the Arctic wall, where do you rate that veracity from 1 to 10?
Oh, geez. I love the idea, so it has to go a few numbers up. I'm gonna go 7 on that. 7's good. Partly because I like it, though.
Okay, well, I mean, I think I have to follow that up with the Earth is flat.
You know what I decide about that? It doesn't really matter. But you know what? I've heard people talk about seeing the curve from the plane, all that. I think in the end of the day, I'm just going to have to go 2 on that. I feel like I've seen the curve.
But it does matter because there can't be infinite land unless there's an infinite plane, and that only happens on a flat Earth.
But that got the higher score because I like the idea. The flat Earth, I don't like the idea. I'm not going to argue
with these are your ratings. I'm not here to like talk you up or down. Unless
I'm not going logical here. I'm going feeling here. I'm going by intuition. Okay. That's how PCP works, right? I'm stuck in a K-hole. This is ketamine, but whatever.
Someone within the last century has successfully summoned a literal demon.
Oh, 10 for that. Yes.
Who and when?
Hey, you know what? I told you I meditate. Very early on, sometimes you're meditating, you just see faces come by. And I'm like, a few of them didn't look happy. Some of them looked interested. I feel like spirits are coming by, and I feel like that's technically me summoning a demon. So, or at least observing a demon.
Well, that's why meditation's not in my Bible. How about
there we go. I got past it, though. I rarely see that stuff anymore.
Medieval alchemists successfully created the element of gold.
8. And the image that comes to mind is X Factor, like 48 or something. It's when they were still the original X-Men, and there's this all that glitters is gold. And every time people talk about gold alchemy, that comic book cover comes to mind.
Celebrity clones. Tell me if I need to expand on that.
Yes, you do. Scientific or stand-ins?
Well, I guess I don't really know the difference between those two. For example, there was a lot of claim that that Jamie Foxx was a clone, and then he came out in a movie that was about him being a clone, and there were like multiple Jamie Foxxes in these secret government laboratories. We've heard that there's different Britney Spears, the Britney Spears that you see dancing on social media now, that's also kind of a body double / clone. So, I mean, I guess it could be either or, but I'm definitely leaning more towards an engineered scientific clone, not just a look-alike that's used as a stand-in Saddam Hussein style.
Yeah, a look-alike 10. I mean, come on, Gallagher there were 3 Gallaghers touring, so 10. That's right there.
Okay, so let's say scientific clone.
Scientific clone. I'm only going to have to go 3 on that. I feel more likely you'd find someone 80% of the way there, and then the science would be like plastic surgery, training, that sort of thing. So I feel like that's more practical. If you clone somebody, what do? Wait 20 years? In Star Trek Nemesis, they supposedly cloned Jean-Luc Picard, and he turns out to be a young Tom Hardy. How does that work?
That's very valid. It's what I usually think of too. Like, how do you know that this guy is going to get powerful enough that he's going to need a clone in like 20, 30 years from now? So,
and I don't think you can raise a clone fast enough. I mean, at this point, it makes more sense to build like an android or find someone 89% of the way there and use medical science to work the other 20%.
Maybe, although let me just point this out. If anyone's listening is interested in this, if you go and search for newspaper articles from the 1910s to the 1930s about feeding human beings pineal glands, that there are many different scattered reports that original tests were that if you fed a pineal gland to a young animal or a young child, that they would advance the course of like 7 years over a summer. And that this was being touted as a way to kind of like skip puberty And the ultimate thing was that they were trying to sell this on farmers, not just for their chickens to grow up and their cows to grow up quicker, but also their kids could be ready to help out on the farm way faster. And then all of a sudden, all of those reports just disappear. Maybe because it turned out it was absolutely false and pseudoscience, or maybe it was because they needed to hoard that information for the celebrity clones.
Okay, then I don't feel too bad about throwing out my 3 or 4. So
Okay.
I haven't heard that before, though.
Crystals hold magic.
Sorry.
You got a pocket full of crystals, don't you?
I got a pocket full of crystals, man. So I'm going to say 9 because, like I said, I don't believe in things. But I'm like, if nothing else, I just have these things that have been in my that are always on me, right? So
it's a more fun version of Pascal's wager.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And also, sometimes it's just if you're bored and out somewhere, I got a few shiny stones to look at, gems.
Reptilian shapeshifters have stepped foot on the planet Earth.
Oh, I got to go at least a 5, 6 on that. Can I choose 2 numbers? I'm kind of like splitting. That's 5.5 then. So I like the idea of the reptilians living.
We round up here.
Inner Earth. Reptilians be in the inner Earth. Let's go 6. Okay, 6. Rounding up.
Dinosaurs are real, or were real.
Okay, are real, man. They could be in the inner Earth too. I'm gonna go 7 for that. I feel more strongly about dinosaurs now in the inner Earth than the reptilians.
How about dragons?
Yeah, sure. I mean, down there it'd be like kind of the same thing. Dragons and dinosaurs would be basically the same thing, wouldn't they? At that point.
I mean, that if that's how your class, so they both get a 7. Dinosaurs.
Tell you what. Yeah. No, 6, because some of the dragons in Japan are just them trying to figure out what a lion looks like without ever having seen a lion before.
Is that true?
Yeah, some of the maybe not a dragon, but some of the temple, temples you'll see a kind of lion thing, but it doesn't look right. They have giraffes that don't quite look right because it was a game of telephone. Someone in Africa described it to several people on the Silk Road, described it to someone in China, described it to someone in Korea. Then it gets to Japan. So at that point, a giraffe is a mystical creature.
How about Darwinian evolution? Rate it 1 to 10.
5. I think it's a viable theory. At the same time, maybe our minds just construct a reality. That's also something out there. And how would you know?
The Knights Templar were baddies, and I don't mean like hot girls. I mean like they were evil Satanists that were kissing cat butts and spitting on the cross because of bad boy stuff.
Okay, see, here's pop culture coming in again. You say Knights Templar. The first thing that pops in my mind is, of course, the bewildered knight guy from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So I'm like, well, that guy seemed chill, didn't he? So 5.
Okay, we're going to go off of Indiana Jones movie. I like that. That Aleister Crowley communicated with extraterrestrials or entities or what have you, versus that he made it all up.
10. I mean, he made up lots of it too, but I think he did experience like some kind of entities.
Okay. Osama bin Laden was buried at sea in 2011 out of respect for his culture.
1. Can I go 0?
9/11 was an inside job.
6.
Building 7 fell from heat.
Oh, from heat. Oh, that's silly. No. Well, heat
and debris. I guess that the official story is that it fell from heat and debris.
And didn't it fall at the wrong time? They announced it first. 3. Isn't that the one where they said it was falling and then it fell?
Yeah, that was on one of the British broadcasts, I believe. They announced it about 7 minutes before it actually fell, as it's still standing behind them with no visual, indication that it was going to fall.
3, because maybe they had a heat ray.
How about The Secret? Do you know The Secret?
The one from the mid 2000s, like the book?
Yeah, the law of attraction, essentially.
I hate that version of it, but 10, because I think I've somewhat effectively used it. But not that version. The more, the old school version. Yeah.
How about that World's Fairs were used as a cover to tear down ancient architecture and hide it from us?
That's a 1 to give it a 10, but realistically, I guess I'm going to have to say 6 or 7, so 7.
Okay, here's one, because you mentioned that you think Aleister Crowley was able to summon entities or whatever, and that someone within the last 100 years was able to summon an actual demon.
I do think he was an asshole, by the way. Just throwing that out there.
And you mentioned that you see weird faces and stuff in meditation. So let me ask you this. Here's a hypothetical that some 11-year-old gets on to Amazon with his parents' credit card for the first time, has never looked into any kind of occult or esoteric anything, and just haphazardly orders a book called Dummy's Guide to Summoning Demons or whatever. There's got to be a book like that somewhere on Amazon, right? Total novice, no idea what he's going into. I guess the point that I'm making is that there's no actual intent here other than just curiosity from a budding mind. Orders a book called How to Summon Demons for Idiots, follows through that whole book and tries to summon a demon. 1 to 10 that this 11-year-old novice can actually summon a demon from an on-demand print book that he got from Amazon.
6, he could stumble into something. Actually, we had a good friend. He moved. His parents had been divorced anyways, living with an uncle. He didn't like his aunt and uncle. He moved with somebody else, like another uncle. And then he like full on got into like 80s style Satanism and stuff. Like, when we'd see him, every time he'd be more and more satanic. I don't think he summoned a demon. Yeah. But he's certainly into it.
Jeffrey Epstein killed himself.
Oh, wait. What's the scale? 1 is no. 1 is no. He didn't kill himself. 1. Yeah. Okay.
1. Do you think that there's knowledge that's dangerous?
That's a good question. Is there knowledge that's dangerous?
To you, let me specify that like you learning some sort of knowledge is dangerous to you.
I'm gonna go 7, and can I spoil the new Mission Impossible film?
I don't care. Yeah.
Okay, so anyone that doesn't want that spoiled, let's anyway. There's this entity, right? Like this could be your demon.
Use your
if you
Dianetics.
Want.
Put up the little mental block and just get through this. Don't bullbait us. Thank you.
So they got the 5D optical drive through crazy Mission Impossible stuff. They have put the entity, this AI that's going to destroy the world, nuclear Armageddon. They've now got him trapped in a 5D optical quantum drive, right? No one should be able to say this. I think they have it. I think even Tom Cruise, Ethan Hunt says something along those lines at the end. But at the end, it's like, you are the Jesus of this movie, Ethan Hunt. You will be in possession of this glowing drive with knowledge that shouldn't exist. Where to me, isn't that when you crush it or throw it on the ground and,
Yeah, this is the Omega Directive from Star Trek, that there's knowledge in the universe that is so complete and truthful that it's dangerous, that even if it's pure, you can't allow it to get into the wrong hands, aka the Borg. So therefore, you must do everything possible to destroy that knowledge just so the Borg can't get it.
That's Lord of the Rings too. You got to get the
right. Yeah, it is Lord of the Rings.
So the new Mission Impossible is like, whatever. Frodo can keep it. He did a lot of work for it.
He's OT8. What's the worst thing that could go wrong?
So okay, yeah, that is the thing. It's like, what, what? So that's why I'm like, I think we can handle a lot of knowledge, but there is a certain level where even you need to realize that, like, and I guess that's knowledge is power, right? So there's a certain power level where no, you don't want that. You wouldn't be on this earth experiencing reality if you wanted so much power.
Rate Thetans for me, since we're talking about Tom Cruise.
What? I don't actually know how Thetans work, so I have not. I have not.
Okay, I'm gonna butcher this a little bit, but I believe one of the core ideas of Scientology and Dianetics is that there's a whole bunch of sort of psychic leeches that were in a big volcano that exploded, and when they all got out, they hooked themselves onto you. So if you have any vices, if you've got addictions, if you've got any sort of mental issues, this is part of the reason why Scientologists are anti-psychiatry, because they think that there's not an issue biologically or chemically in your head, that they're actually these extraterrestrial, interdimensional Thetans that latch on. So you might have an alcoholic Thetan and a lazy Thetan and like like a hypersensitive Thetan and an emotional Thetan, and you have to kind of clear those. And I believe that's what they call going clear in Scientology, is that you've cleared your body of all these parasitic Thetans and therefore don't have any vices left.
Oh, but Vice is
I
gonna be
won't. I
so
won't make
fun.
you write that if you haven't heard of Thetans before.
No, I've heard of Thetans. I just never really thought very hard about what they were because I didn't get into Dianetics. But I'm rating your Thetans. I don't know how many Thetans you want. You have 4. I don't know. 4 seems like a nice number, right?
Okay. Okay. How about
You can live with 4.
How about the Mandela effect?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, that's partly, again, if our minds are somewhat making reality, we may be all doing it ourselves, but 10. I've Mandela things.
1 to 10 that Walt Disney is still cryogenically preserved somewhere. Even if it's just his head.
1, even if he was, the thing broke down, it leaked. They're like, crap, he's been in there all night and it's been warm now. So something went wrong. The technology, 60s technology, come on, no.
I always have to point this out too, that most modern day cryogenicists, the ones that actually believe in cryogenics still and use it, they all believe in a last in, first out theory, which means that if you were frozen 5 years ago, you get thawed out before someone that was frozen 50 years ago, because there's more of a chance that less cell damage has happened to you, so that when the technology is good enough that they can actually thaw someone, they're not going to jump straight to Disney, because they're going to have to figure out some extra technology that also deals with freezer burn, whereas you might not have the same amount of freezer burn, so there's a better chance of you being successful. So even if Walt Disney was frozen, he's going to have to wait way longer for...
He paid Lightning Lane.
Yeah, he has to pay for the $400 Lightning Lane pass. Yeah.
He can afford it.
Unfortunately,
two. He might. I'll give it a 2 then, because he might have Lightning Lane.
How about rate cryptocurrencies 1 to 10 that they are organic and totally not created by intelligence agencies in order to control us?
1 means I think they're crappy, or 10 means I think they're crappy.
What 1 means you think they're organic, 10 means you think that they were engineered to control humanity.
Isn't the guy that created the first one like secretive and weird, and we don't know who he is?
Satoshi, yeah, and there's all sorts of guesses as to who he actually is.
Okay, I'll be slightly skeptical and give it a 9.
Let's see. The last, I'll throw the last couple ones. You already kind of like pre-answered some of these. You kind of like read ahead in the book, but let me ask you this specifically: that a human being in the last 100 years has stepped foot on the moon.
We have to, if the Earth's flat, then the moon might not be there. But so that presupposes that.
Well, that's not true, because there could be a localized moon.
Okay, good point.
And if there's a localized moon, then there's an even greater chance that we've stepped foot on it, because it's way closer than a non-localized moon. Okay,
this is one of my favorite conspiracy theories. I love the Kubrick stuff. At the end of the day, though, I do have to pitch up to 6 that I'm also a sci-fi geek, and I want to think that we've had people on the moon.
Okay, so 6 that people have landed on the moon. How about rate the actual Apollo 11 footage that was broadcast? How much credit do you give that specific footage?
That I'm going to give like a 3. I think at very least they had to redo it. I do ascribe by Kubrick to not make that footage, though, because it looks like garbage, and he wouldn't have made garbage footage.
Okay, you're reading ahead again. So the last one is that Kubrick was involved in the Apollo 11 or any of the Apollo mission footage.
I'm going to go 6 there, because I like the idea that he did that, right? But I feel like we would have got much better moon footage if we did. 2001: A Space Odyssey looks way better in the Apollo 11 footage.
I think you're off the hook, man. You did a pretty good job. I think you actually gave a lot of more high ratings on the stuff. So I guess you're in the esoteric occult book club now.
Good for you to know that. But yeah, like I said, it's a big part is like, if you go with the presupposition, like, I don't believe in anything, it just gives you the freedom to think about whatever you want, and not, like, oh, I shouldn't be thinking about this. Why not? I can think about this. I don't believe in anything.
Are you
not as a nihilist? But
is this atheism talking now?
No, because I'm telling you, I think there are things beyond. I've done lucid dreaming. I've had weird meditations where it could all be mind games, but there's a whole lot going on in there, so.
Is it even possible to believe in demonic possession and be an atheist?
Well, could we believe in a supernatural world that is not necessarily religiously dictated? Like there's no God, but there's a weird beyond. There's,
I feel like now we're getting into agnosticism and deism more so than atheism.
Yeah.
That's my own interpretation of the definition, but I think atheism usually precludes any supernatural activity, or it ascribes all supernatural activity to just kind of like the Clark's, any sufficiently advanced technology is imperceptible from magic, or whatever that quote is. I think that's how I interpret atheism, is that everything could be explained at some point. But if you're saying there could be some weirdness out there, that almost sounds like agnosticism.
Like, here's one thing I will say I maybe kind of believe in because it's personal experience. And hey, this is actually the first time I even had a conversation. The chakra system. I'm into that. Like when I started meditating in 2016, I was like, think I was very clearly around that third one, and then I got more comfortable with my life. They were 4. 5's the one where you're more communicative. That's where I start podcasting stuff. Maybe I'm working on 6 now. I can trip out at will when I master at. I can walk down the street and everything's on LSD. That's what I want. That's what I was trying for in the first place, isn't it?
Do you think it's rude to rise your Kundalini out in public?
A little bit.
Like if no one was asking you to do it and you're like, Kundalini rising.
Actually, I've been walking down the street and suddenly feel like a spark of energy doing that. So what is that? I don't know. Is that necessarily mystical or anything? I don't know. But it's there. It happened, Didn't happen before I started meditating and stuff. It's kind of fun. Every once in a while I wake up in the morning, it's like lying on a pleasant power cord.
How is that? What is this like?
Every once in a while I wake up in the morning, I can definitely feel like Kundalini energy ripping through, And so I think of it as like a pleasant power cord, like you're laying on the power cord, but it's nice.
And you're sure this isn't like chemtrails?
Hey, maybe the chemtrails are causing it too. I don't know. As I don't believe, just telling you my experience,
It could be the Delta 9 chemtrails.
Yes.
Well, let everyone know where they can find all your other podcasts and all the other cool stuff you got going on. Again, all the links are going to be in the description, as they always are.
Like I said, and keep it too easy. Links, all the podcasting is at podcastius.org. All the music is at rovingsagemedia.bandcamp.com.
Look at that. Are you on Spotify? Do we need to get you on Spotify too?
I don't. Podcast, I think. Our music's not. Yeah.
Oh, we need to get your music on Spotify, man.
Yeah. See, here's the weird thing. I please listen to the music. I would love feedback, blah, blah. But I very much just make music for myself, like now. Like I go insane if I don't make a song every month or something. I'll get depressed. So
you need to share it with the world, man, especially with how much music you do output, all the extra theme song. A lot of people don't realize that for every theme song that they hear, like variation, like Matt's got an equal number, probably even more than that. So maybe we'll start rotating out. And even the Cartoon Cabal theme song, that if you haven't listened to that series, go check for Cartoon Cabal. I think it'll probably be out by the time this one comes out. That also was part of your doing, was it not?
The song is actually the drums are currently electronic, but I think we're gonna have a full recorded on computers, but analog track in the end, which will be kind of cool because people don't do that anymore, do they?
Well, highly recommend it. Go listen to Binaural Beats. Go listen to all the rest of the podcast. Definitely have to watch Occult Disney. It's getting better and better with every single episode. We're finally figuring out the formula. Maybe we need to go back and I've said this a couple of times. I feel like we have to go back and start all over again. We got to start with Snow White and then work all the way through at least Fantasia again. Because
we'll have to take a look back at those. And also, as we get closer to the present, it's like a little more relevant because when you're talking Snow White, like we talked about then, like people were into more esoteric stuff and mysticism in the 30s. It wasn't weird to go to your friend's house and they want to do a seance or something, where modern stuff's different, right? So it's a different world, whereas stuff, now where are we now? We're about to do Frankenweenie. Hey, that seems to make sense for modern sensibilities cross-wired with Frankenstein, right?
Well, this has been another episode of the Paranoid American Podcast. Get all your conspiracies here. I've got plenty of other cool stuff for you to check out. don't sleep on freaking Occult Disney, man. Go to occultdisney.com while you can. And also, I'm wearing the Occult Disney shirt. And just to answer your question, no, you can't have one because I don't want to get sued like Midjourney is right now by Disney. But Matt can have one. I can have one, and Matt can have one, and you can't.
Ready for a cosmic conspiracy about Stanley Kubrick, moon landings, and the CIA? Go visit nasacomic.com.
nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com, go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com. Oh, nasacomic.com, CIA's biggest con. Stanley Kubrick put us on, that's why we're singing this song. I'm nasacomic.com, go visit nasacomic.com. Go visit nasacomic.com. Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
Never a Straight Answer is a 40-page comic about Stanley Kubrick directing the Apollo space missions.
Yeah, go visit nasacomic.com.
This is the perfect read for comic, Kubrick, or conspiracy fans of all ages. For more details, visit nasacomic.com.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.